Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome again to another podcast episode on Talk Architecture. I'm your host, Naziaty Muhammad Yaqub. And from the year 1998 to 2024, I had been a disability activist. That's why we get disability content in this podcast. Now, disability has everything to do with architecture, and architecture has everything to do with disability. There is a relationship. But today's episode, the first part, I would like to explain in the Malaysian context about the background to the disability movement or disability situation in Malaysia, which may reflect the problem in your country as well. So let me give an idea about what's going on and why I am doing this podcast. And one of the reasons is why we're coming to a decade of being stuck. And like I said in my Facebook post, the politicians at the state and federal levels keep on meddling with the civil servants' job since the establishment of the Persons with Disabilities Act 2008. Would not focus on reviewing the, quote, toothless, unquote, Persons with Disability Act, as explained in an article that I will comment on. So we are coming to this decade of nothingness and being stuck collectively. Evidence show that the street environment is not usable if you use a motorized wheelchair, and even manual wheelchair, you can't get to the pavements, and you'll be sharing the roads with motorized vehicles in a very, very unsafe way. Bus stops have ramps that go into the road so that you can be picked up from the road onto the bus, and it doesn't work. The whole thing is not well thought of or planned or even implemented. They say they have ramps, but they do it wrongly. It's either steep, unsafe, or it's like an add-on. You don't think of the entrance to a building to be welcoming and include everyone from the word go, from the same point. You're thinking about a little ramp somewhere so that the wheelchair user can get on it if they come. That's why there are none coming to the place anyway. So we have been talking to ourselves many, many years, and now we are talking to everyone, and it has to be included. Now is the time. So I would like to also say that there were several newspaper readings on how the minister, somehow the onus or the Person with Disability Act is chaired by the Minister of Women, Family, Community Development. And in 2023, the minister said that the act will be tabled in 2024, or the revision of the act will be tabled. And even the deputy recently said earlier this year it will be tabled again. And when will it be tabled, the revision to the act? Now, why are they having a problem to table the act? And it is explicitly explained here. The problem is in the harmonization of domestic legislation with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So we know that Malaysia had signed, this is like a background. The PWD Act, or that's acronym for this act, was passed right around the time Malaysia signed the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD. So I'm going to give the acronym after this. However, domestic implementation remains largely misaligned with the international treaty. The core issue is that The Persons with Disabilities Act 2008 operates primarily on an administrative, quote, welfare and charity, unquote, model, whereas the UN CRPD mandates a legally enforceable, quote, rights-based, unquote, framework. So this is a quote coming from this article. This article is started by Malaysians, is in the website OKU Rights Matter. OKU means orang kurang upaya or persons with disabilities, from the Malay word. So okurightsmatter.com. So harmonization of domestic legislation with the CRPD. So in this article, we have an introduction. Everyone needs to know because it affects everyone. When you want to do the Senior Citizen Act, when you want to plan and prepare for the environment to be accessible, you got to look at the issues at hand, because when you resolve the accessibility issues, you would achieve this compliance and the standard, the minimum one, so that disabled persons can access as everyone else. And this in turn will make everything else accessible, and you can have elderly persons, parents with young children, and mothers who are nurturing or who are nursing, or they are expectant. So, a lot of the percentage of society will be able to do basic things, and things will be easier. So the introduction here in this article says Malaysia signed in 2008 and ratified in 2010 the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD. A closer look at Malaysia's domestic legislation, including the PWD Act 2008, reveals a need for its harmonization of the principles and provisions of the CRPD. Harmonization of domestic legislation with the CRPD is an essential step towards upholding the rights of persons with disabilities in all aspects of living and protecting persons with disabilities from all forms of discrimination, harassment, and marginalization. Harmonization of domestic legislation with the CRPD cannot be confined only to the national disability law. Other laws that need to be harmonized with the CRPD include, but are not limited to, the infrastructure, systems, and services pertaining to the following: education, health, human resources development, employment, housing and local government, transport, assistive technologies, digital accessibility, internet access, communication and multimedia, banking, insurance, and other financial services, built environment, including the street environment, buildings and public spaces and amenities, justice, domestic trade and consumer affairs, enterprise development, including small, medium, and social enterprises, tourism and recreation, public procurement, rural development. So there is a link for the full documentation on CRPD that you can get if you were to go to okurightsmatter.com on the harmonization of domestic legislation with the CRPD. You can also see case studies on this from Australia, China, India, Republic of Korea, and Thailand, and you compare between the selected countries in both English and Bahasa Malaysia. So when we get to the points here, the particular points, the structural comparison, domestic law versus international standard, let us compare what it is, what is it that we want to evaluate with one act, with the convention, and then we see the gap. So one of the things is we want to see the legal enforceability and penalties. Number one, So in the Malaysian PWD Act, there is no penal provisions or judicial remedies. The law cannot fine or punish violators. So in the CRPD standard, mandatory domestic remedies and legal enforcement mechanisms, Articles 4 and 5. So, and then what is the gap here? Domestic law is virtually unenforceable. Okay? Not enforceable. Yeah. So, what is the other evaluation? Anti-discrimination protections that we really need. So, for the Act, the word discrimination or harassment do not appear in the text. For the CRPD, explicitly bans discrimination in all aspects of life, Articles 5 and 27. This is quite blatant, yeah, in terms of the law was enacted during that time, but it didn't really take into account what was in the CRPD. It did sign, did ratify, but that's all it is, wobbling about, slowly creeping the last decade. We're coming to 2028 soon. So, okay, sorry, the gap with that one on anti-discrimination is that no civil protections against disability bias. So another evaluation of state immunity from lawsuits. So we know that Section 41 and 42 explicitly shield public authorities from being sued if they fail their duties. So for the CRPD, it says that holds the state directly accountable for protecting citizens' human rights. Article 4. So the gap is the state is statutorily insulated from legal accountability. Well, we can't have that, can we? I mean, then what are we doing, you know? There are a lot of things that the state is responsible for. So another evaluation is on the freedom of movement and safety. So the access, the act is severely compromised due to formal treaty reservations. But for the CRPD, full liberty of movement, nationality, and protection from abuse, Articles 15 and 18. So Malaysia treats those rights as non-binding. Some of the rights are not being ratified, or that's to do with the optional protocol. So the last evaluation is independent oversight body, governed internally by a national council managed by a ministry, as I mentioned earlier. The CRPD says it requires a fully independent monitoring commission, Article 33, bracket 2. So the critical gap is structural deficit, lacks independent parliamentary reporting. To me, this is a big deal. And we can't move unless we are independent, really. So we've discussed about this a lot before a decade or so ago. So detailed policy disconnects is, number one, the total absence of discrimination clauses. The PWD Act 2008, the law focuses extensively on the administrative promotion and facilitation of access. It completely omits a legal definition of discrimination. As a result, an OKU individual who is denied employment or housing solely due to their condition has no legal route to sue for discrimination under this act. For the UN, CRPD defines discrimination on the basis of disability to include the denial of reasonable accommodation. It views any systemic exclusion as a human rights violation. The second point is a sovereignty of state immunity, Section 41 and 42. So the PWD Act 208 under Sections 41 and 42, no action, suit, or persecution can be brought against the government, national council, or any public officer for acts done in good faith. This means if a local municipal council builds inaccessible public infrastructure, disabled citizens cannot legally sue the government to compel structural changes. The UN CRPD explicitly mandate that state parties take all appropriate legislative, administrative, and legal measures to modify and abolish existing laws, regulations, and customs that constitute discrimination. Number 3 is formal government reservations to the RCPD. Malaysia, when they ratified the UN CRPD in 2010, the government placed formal reservation on 2 core components of the international treaty. Article 15, freedom from torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Article 18, liberty of movement and nationality. Because of these reservations, the international framework lacks full local leverage. Furthermore, Malaysia has refused to sign the CRPD optional protocol, meaning local disabled citizens cannot escalate unresolved human rights violations to the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So the current state to close the gap. So it seems that the upcoming 2026 federal legislative amendments represent a concerted effort to resolve the systemic flaws. Advocates are using the text of the UN CRPD to demand that the Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development formally introduce clear penalties and fines for public and private organizations that fail to provide universal access to the establishment of Disability Rights Tribunal to settle disputes outside the backlogged standard court system. 3, the elimination of sections 41 and 42 to finally make the government legally accountable. And then we would like to know that this issue at the end, when to do with that, it's only under children with disabilities in Malaysia, which is an issue brief for UNICEF. And it was being brought to the attention of UNICEF. So really, that was when. It is very slow. Now, promises and, announcements that it will be reviewed, but it doesn't happen. How come? Why is there stop, we're not moving forward sort of thing happening for this? Now, when we talk about this, obviously we need to look at the case studies of the different countries and how they do it. And also, it's all there in OKU Rights Matter. And the article is up there for some time. And it's just a matter of making decisions. Yeah, here it is. By Amar Singh, Dato Amar Singh, doctor, and Sun Yuan Hua on the 12th of October 2023. So it is there, it's published. People can have a look at it and refer to it. And this is just something as an introduction for all professionals, including architects and those responsible for the built environment and the development of the built environment. Because once we focus on accessibility and universal design and how it is done through legislation, then one would understand about why one don't want to find excuses, but one will understand about why it is imperative that we need to harmonize the domestic legislation with the CRPD. So thank you very much for listening to this.